They call me the Beast of Yorkshire, because scars are easier to fear than pain.
They never looked at me, because being invisible was easier than being chosen. They feared what they saw in me.
They never saw me at all.
They whispered his name in drawing rooms like a curse. The Beast of Yorkshire. A man whose face bore the savage marks of fire, whose heart had turned to ice beneath the ruin of his flesh. No respectable lady would meet his gaze. No mother would permit her daughter within 10 feet of his shadow. And yet, in the furthest corner of the Ashford ballroom, beneath a wilting potted fern and the weight of 23 years of invisibility, Miss Clara Bentley watched him with something that was not horror. It was recognition, for she too knew what it meant to be looked through, talked over, and dismissed as though one's very existence were an inconvenience to polite society. While London's glittering elite swirled in silk and candlelight, these two souls, one marked by flame, the other by obscurity, stood apart. Neither could have known that before the season's end, they would shatter every rule that sought to keep them lonely. This is the story of a spinster no one saw, and the Duke who saw nothing else. The season of 1824 began, as all London seasons did, with champagne, scandal, and the ruthless categorization of every unmarried woman into one of three groups: the diamonds, the eligibles, and the forgotten. Clara Bentley belonged, without question, to the third. She was not ugly. Indeed, her features were pleasant enough, soft brown curls framing a face that might have been called lovely had anyone bothered to look. But at 23, with a modest dowry and no connections worth mentioning, she had become what society most abhorred: invisible. Her cousin, Lady Cordelia Ashford, kept her as a companion, a pale shadow to amplify Cordelia's own brilliance. And so Clara lingered at the edges of ballrooms, a ghost in lavender muslin, holding Cordelia's shawl, while gentlemen pressed close to claim dances with the diamond of the season. She had learned not to hope. Hope, after all, was a luxury reserved for girls who mattered. But on this particular evening, as rain drummed against the windows of Ashford House, and the orchestra swelled with a waltz Clara would never dance, fate arrived in the form of a man society had long ago cast aside. Alexander Thorne, the 7th Duke of Blackwood, entered the ballroom like winter itself, cold, unwelcome, and impossible to ignore. The left side of his face bore the twisted, angry scars of fire that had nearly claimed his life 5 years prior. His mouth, once sensual, now pulled slightly at the corner. His eye, though keen and ice blue, sat within a landscape of damaged flesh. He was wealth. He was title. He was utterly, devastatingly alone. And when his gaze swept the room and landed, impossibly, on the spinster in the corner, everything changed. Clara had perfected the art of stillness. It was a skill born of necessity, learned through countless evenings of standing just outside the light, just beyond notice. If she did not move, did not speak, did not draw attention to her unfortunate existence, the evening would pass without incident. Cordelia would charm a dozen suitors, accept 3 bouquets, and never once remember that Clara had been there at all. And that, Clara told herself, was perfectly acceptable. She required nothing, expected nothing, desired nothing, except perhaps a glass of lemonade, and possibly a chair. The ballroom shimmered with opulence, crystal chandeliers casting honeyed light across marble floors, the air thick with perfume and ambition. Debutantes floated past in clouds of silk, their laughter musical and calculated. Mothers whispered behind painted fans. Gentlemen prowled like wolves in evening dress, assessing bloodlines and bank accounts with every glance. Clara watched it all from her position beside the fern, her hands folded neatly, her expression schooled into pleasant neutrality. She had become so good at being unnoticed that sometimes she wondered if she had ceased to exist altogether. Then the music stopped. A hush fell, and every head in the ballroom turned toward the entrance. Clara's breath caught as she followed their stares. There, framed in the doorway like something from a Gothic tale, stood the Duke of Blackwood. His evening clothes were immaculate, his posture rigid with aristocratic pride. But was his face, or rather, half of it, that commanded every eye? The scars gleamed dully in the candlelight, a topography of suffering that society found utterly intolerable. Women gasped, men stiffened, and Clara felt something sharp and unexpected pierce her chest. Pity? No. Recognition. Alexander Thorne had not attended a London ball in 5 years. He had sworn, after the fire, after the surgeries, after watching his betrothed flee in horror from his bedside, that he would never again subject himself to society's revulsion. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. He would live in the north, manage his estates, and allow the world to forget him. But his mother, the Dowager Duchess, had other plans. She had wept. She had pleaded. She had invoked duty, lineage, and the desperate need for an heir. And so, against every instinct screaming for him to remain hidden, Alexander had come to London, to this ballroom, to be stared at like a curiosity in a traveling show. He felt their eyes like knives, heard the whispers, beast, monster, poor man, as though he were deaf as well as disfigured. His jaw tightened, his gloved hands clenching into fists. He would stay for 1 hour. He would prove to his mother that this was impossible. And then he would return to Yorkshire and never leave again. His gaze swept the room with cold detachment, cataloging the usual tableau, simpering debutantes, calculating matrons, foppish gentlemen pretending not to stare. He saw no kindness here, no warmth, only the brittle cruelty of the ton, dressed in satin and lace. And then there, in the corner, half hidden by a ridiculous fern, stood a young woman in a gown the color of fading twilight. She was not beautiful in the way society demanded. She was not glittering or bold. But she was looking at him, not with horror, not with pity, with something else entirely. Curiosity? Compassion? He could not say. But for the first time in 5 years, Alexander felt seen. And it terrified him. Clara knew she was staring. Knew it was rude, dangerous, the sort of breach that could draw unwanted attention. Yet she could not look away. The Duke of Blackwood stood alone in a sea of people, his isolation so profound it seemed to radiate from him like cold. She watched as Lady Pemberton turned her daughter away with a theatrical shudder, watched as Lord Hastings made a jest that sent a ripple of cruel laughter through his circle. And she felt something inside her, something she had thought long dead, flare to life. Anger. Before she could think better of it, Clara stepped forward. Not far, just 1 step, but it was enough to dislodge her from the safety of the shadows. Her slipper caught on the hem of her gown. She stumbled, arms pinwheeling, and collided directly into the solid, immovable form of a gentleman. No, not a gentleman. The gentleman, the Duke. His hands caught her elbows, steadying her with effortless strength. Clara gasped, mortification flooding her cheeks with color. She dared to look up and found herself staring directly into eyes the color of winter skies. One side of his face was perfect, strong jaw, high cheekbone, a mouth that might have been sculpted by a master. The other side was a landscape of scars, puckered and angry, twisting his features into something society deemed monstrous. Clara did not flinch. She simply stared, breathless, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain he could hear it. "Forgive me," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the resumed murmur of the ballroom. "I did not mean. Are you hurt?" His voice was deep, rough, edged with something that might have been concern. It startled her. No one ever asked if she was hurt. "No, Clara. No, I am perfectly well. I am so dreadfully sorry." He released her slowly, as though she might shatter. "The fault was mine," he said stiffly. "I should not have been standing in your path." For a moment, just one impossible, breathless moment, they simply stood there, caught in a silence that felt louder than any music. Alexander could not comprehend what had just occurred. This woman, this slip of a girl in lavender, had crashed into him and had not recoiled, had not screamed, had not looked at him as though he were something to be pitied or feared. Instead, she looked flustered, embarrassed, as though she were the one at fault. It was so startling, so utterly foreign, that he forgot to maintain his customary coldness. "You're certain you are unharmed?" he asked again, his tone less brusque. Clara nodded, unable to form words. She was acutely aware of the eyes upon them now. Curious, scandalized eyes that noted every second she remained in the Duke's proximity. Cordelia would be furious. Society would talk, and yet she could not seem to move. "What is your name?" The question escaped him before he could stop it. Foolish. He did not need to know her name. He would leave this place and never see her again. "Clara," she said softly. "Clara Bentley. I am Lady Ashford's cousin." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Recognition, perhaps, or disdain. Everyone knew Lady Ashford. Everyone coveted her. But this girl, Clara, was nothing like her glittering cousin. She was quiet, unremarkable, and yet Alexander found he could not look away. "I am Blackwood," he said, though surely she knew. Everyone knew. "I know," Clara whispered. And then, before she could stop herself, she added, "They are wrong about you." His entire body went rigid. "You know nothing about me." "No," she agreed, her voice trembling but steady. "But no cruelty when I see it. And I know what it is to be invisible." She curtsied, a quick, graceless thing, and fled before he could respond. Alexander stood frozen, staring after her, his heart pounding in a way it had not in years. "They're wrong about you." What did she mean? The scandal erupted before Clara had even reached the retiring room. Whispers followed her like hounds, snapping at her heels with gleeful viciousness. By the time Cordelia found her, standing before a mirror, trying desperately to compose herself, the damage was complete. "What?" Cordelia hissed, her beautiful face twisted with fury. "Were you thinking?" Clara flinched. "I tripped. It was an accident." "An accident? You collided with the Beast of Yorkshire in front of the entire ton. Do you have any idea what people are saying? They think you were angling for his attention. They think you were throwing yourself at him. That is absurd. Is it?" Cordelia's eyes glittered with something ugly. "You are 23, Clara. A spinster. Desperate. Of course they think you were trying to trap him." Each word landed like a blow. Clara's hands trembled, her throat tightening with unshed tears. "I did not. I would never. It does not matter what you intended. What matters is that you have made me look like a fool for keeping you as a companion. My mother is furious. You will apologize to the Duke at once." "Apologize?" Clara's voice cracked. "I already apologized." "Then do it again. Publicly. And then you will keep yourself hidden for the remainder of the season. Do you understand me, Clara? You will be invisible, as you should have been all along." Clara's vision blurred. She nodded mutely, hating herself for her weakness, for the tears that threatened to spill. Cordelia swept from the room, leaving Clara alone with her shame. Except she was not alone. In the doorway, half hidden in shadow, stood the Duke of Blackwood. And from the look on his scarred face, fury, cold and terrible, he had heard every word. Alexander Thorne had witnessed cruelty before. He had endured it, survived it, allowed it to reshape him into something hard and unyielding. But hearing that vicious creature tear into Miss Bentley, sweet, trembling Clara who had looked at him without horror, ignited a rage so profound it took every ounce of his considerable control not to storm into that room and create a scene that would shake London to its foundations. Instead, he waited, watched as Clara emerged, her eyes red-rimmed, her shoulders hunched as though she wished to disappear into the wallpaper. She did not see him. She moved like a ghost through the corridor, heading toward the servants' entrance, an exit meant for those who did not matter. Something in Alexander's chest cracked. "Miss Bentley." His voice cut through the silence like a blade. She stopped, froze, her entire body going rigid with what he now recognized as habitual fear. Slowly, she turned. When she saw him, her eyes widened. "Your Grace, I must apologize again. I did not mean to." "Stop." He closed the distance between them in 3 strides, looming over her not with menace, but with an intensity that stole her breath. "You will not apologize to me again. Not tonight. Not ever. Do you understand?" Clara blinked, confusion warring with something that looked dangerously like hope. But Lady Ashford said, I care nothing for what Lady Ashford said. His voice was low, fierce, edged with a protectiveness that startled them both. She's a fool and a bully, and you deserve better. Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks before she could stop them. No one is ever. I am not. She could not finish. The words tangled in her throat, years of dismissal and diminishment choking her. Alexander did something he had not done in 5 years. He reached out, his gloved hand gently, so gently, brushing a tear from her cheek. You are not invisible to me, he said quietly. You never were. The words hung between them, fragile and impossible. Clara stared up at the Duke, her heart threatening to beat straight out her chest. She should flee, should thank him politely and disappear before anyone saw them alone together. But her feet would not obey. Her body, her heart, her very soul seemed rooted to the spot, held captive by the intensity in his eyes. What? The question escaped her as a whisper. Why would you? I am nobody. Nothing. You could have anyone. I could have no one, Alexander corrected, his voice bitter. Look at me, Clara. Truly look. I'm a monster to them. A curiosity. A cautionary tale mothers tell their daughters to ensure obedience. His scarred jaw tightened. But when you looked at me tonight, you saw something else. And I. He paused, the vulnerability in his expression almost unbearable. I cannot remember the last time someone saw me as anything other than my scars. Clara's breath hitched. She understood. Oh, how she understood. To be looked through, dismissed, erased. I see you, she whispered. I see a man who has suffered. But suffering does not make one a beast. Something shifted in his expression, softened, cracked open. Come with me, he said abruptly. Back to the ballroom. What? No, I cannot, Lady Ashford said. Lady Ashford, Alexander said coldly, can go to the devil. You will dance with me, Clara Bentley. One waltz, in front of all of them, and they will see that you are not invisible, that you matter. Panic flooded her. They will tear me apart. They already think I was throwing myself at you. If we dance, then let them think it, he said fiercely. Let them whisper and gossip and clutch their pearls. I do not care, but I will not allow you to hide in corners while that poisonous woman makes you feel small. He extended his hand. Dance with me. Clara stared at his hand, strong, steady, offering her something she had never dreamed possible. And despite every instinct screaming caution, she placed her trembling fingers in his. The ballroom fell silent as they entered. Not the hush of respect, but the shocked, avid silence of spectators witnessing a scandal in motion. Alexander felt every eye upon them, heard the whispers that rose like a tide. But he did not falter. His hand remained firm at Clara's waist as he led her to the center of the floor, his expression carved from ice and aristocratic disdain. Your Grace, the orchestra leader stammered. Shall we a waltz? Alexander commanded, his voice brooking no argument. Now, the music began, a sweeping, romantic melody that seemed almost mocking given the circumstances. Clara's hand shook in his. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with barely suppressed panic. She stumbled on the first step, and he steadied her effortlessly. Look at me, he murmured, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Not at them, at me. She obeyed, lifting her gaze to his. And in that moment, the ballroom ceased to exist. There were no whispers, no scandalized gasps, no venomous stares. There was only the warmth of her hand in his, the surprising grace with which she followed his lead once her fear subsided, and the soft wonder in her eyes as they moved together across the floor. You dance beautifully, he said, surprised by the truth of it. I have never danced before, Clara admitted, breathless. Not truly, not with anyone who mattered. Then we are both making our debut, Alexander replied, a ghost of a smile touching the unscarred corner of his mouth. I have not danced since the fire. Her fingers tightened in his. Thank you, she whispered. For this. For seeing me. Clara. His voice was rough with emotion he had thought himself incapable of feeling. It is I who should thank you. You gave me something tonight I thought I had lost forever. What? Hope. The words settled between them like a vow. And as the music swelled, and they turned beneath the chandelier's golden light, neither noticed the storm gathering in Lady Ashford's eyes. By morning, London was ablaze with gossip. The Beast of Yorkshire had danced with a nobody, a spinster companion of no consequence. Some claimed she had entrapped him. Others whispered that he had done it as an act of charity, a cruel joke. The cruelest suggested he could afford to be seen with someone like Clara Bentley precisely because his own face made her seem almost acceptable by comparison. Clara woke to find her belongings packed and waiting by the door of her tiny chamber in the Ashford residence. No note, no explanation, simply the cold, brutal efficiency of dismissal. She was being cast out. Panic clawed at her throat as she descended the stairs, clutching her valise. Cordelia waited in the entrance hall, her expression icy with triumph. "My mother has decided," Cordelia announced, loud enough for the assembled servants to hear, "that your presence here is no longer appropriate. You have embarrassed this family with your desperate, unseemly behavior. You will leave at once." "Where am I to go?" Clara's voice broke on the question. She had no other family, no prospects, no money beyond the pittance saved from years of serving as Cordelia's unpaid companion. "That," Cordelia said sweetly, "is no longer my concern." Clara felt the world tilt. This was it then? The inevitable consequence of daring to be seen. She would end up in some charity house, or worse, on the streets begging for scraps. All because a duke had shown her one moment of kindness. The knock at the door shattered the awful silence. A footman opened it, revealing a stern-faced man in impeccable livery. "I'm looking for Miss Clara Bentley," he announced. "I've been sent by His Grace, the Duke of Blackwood." Every head in the entrance hall swiveled. Cordelia's mouth fell open. Clara's heart stuttered in her chest. I am she," Clara managed. The man bowed. "His Grace requests your presence at Blackwood House." Immediately, Blackwood House was everything Clara had imagined a duke's London residence would be. Imposing, elegant, utterly intimidating. She was shown into a library that smelled of leather and smoke, where Alexander Thorne stood with his back to the fire, his expression unreadable. "You sent for me," Clara said, her voice small in the vast room. "I heard what they did to you." His voice was tight with barely leashed fury. "I will not allow it. Your Grace, you cannot. I am ruined already. There is nothing. There is everything," he interrupted, crossing to her in 2 strides. "Clara, I've spent 5 years hiding from the world, convincing myself I was better off alone, that no one could see past these scars." He gestured to his ravaged face. "But you did. You looked at me and saw a man. Not a beast. Not a title. A man." Tears blurred her vision. "I do not understand. Marry me." The words were raw, urgent, stripped of all artifice. "I know this is madness. I know we barely know one another. But I cannot. I will not. Let them destroy you for the crime of showing me kindness. Marry me, and you will have a home, a name, protection. You will never be invisible again." Clara's breath left her in a rush. "You do not have to rescue me. This is not rescue," Alexander said fiercely, taking her hands in his. "This is selfishness, because when I held you last night, when you looked at me without flinching, I felt alive for the first time in 5 years. And I am not brave enough to let that go." Clara stared up at him, this scarred, broken, beautiful man who was offering her everything she had never dared to dream. "I see you," she whispered again, the words of benediction. "I see you, Alexander, and I'm not afraid." His hand cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Then say yes," he breathed. "Please, Clara, say yes." And she did. In a library that smelled of hope and new beginnings, the invisible spinster and the Beast of Yorkshire chose each other.